Hi there. Welcome to class 3 of ABM 101, where we are going to finish off the 7 principles of basic principles of ABM. So, as you know, this is the ABM 101 course, which is part of a 5-course ABM program. The rest of the course is coming soon. And in ABM 101, we're in class 3. We've given an overview of why ABM, why it matters. We've gone through principles 1 through 3. Now we're going to go through principles 4 through 7. And then in the last class, we're going to help you get started with ABM. So today's learning objective is really understand principles 4 through 7, and then we're going to really dive in on those. As we covered in the last class, the first 3 principles are to target best fit customers, find out who appears to be in market using buying signals, and then market to buyers the way that they buy. Understand the buyer journey and tailor your marketing accordingly. In the next set of principles, we're going to look at the 3 flavors of ABM. We're also going to talk about ways to use personalization to engage buyers and cover off why personalization is important. And then I'm going to give you a few examples of personalization in action. Number 6 is about developing some ABM-centric measures, some new ways of measuring marketing, which are much more closely tied to revenue. And last but not least, we're going to talk about sales and marketing alignment. It's the single biggest reason why ABM fails is because of that issue. So, as I mentioned, there are 3 flavors of ABM. So they are known as one-to-one ABM, or also some people call it strategic ABM, or even enterprise ABM. I've heard it used as, but the notion of one-to-one, and what one-to-one is about focusing your marketing on a really small set of accounts, less than 50. In fact, quite often it's less than 10 accounts. And typically this is where marketing and sales are working extremely close together, maybe even with account management as well, to help figure out how to convert a really large account. So that's one-to-one. The second flavor is one-to-few. So this is more segment specific. So if you recall in the last class, I mentioned one client of ours that has that they address the healthcare, life sciences, retail, and financial services markets. So they have account lists for each one of those segments that are in the hundreds, sort of few hundreds. And what they do is they have a marketing campaign for each one of them, a segment-specific one. The other way that they also do it, and I'll touch on this later, is that they have a segment specifically for their competitors' customers. The last one is one-to-many. And this is, kind of more like traditional demand generation, where you're marketing to well over 200 accounts, in many cases, thousands of accounts. And what you're trying to do is identify the ones that seem to have the higher likelihood of being in market. So you may be using third-party intent data to identify in-market accounts. So you go from, say, 1,000 accounts down to 200 accounts, and you market specifically to them. And then as they start to become, much more engaged with you, you then may change to a more, more segment specific or a one-to-one specific account marketing approach for those particular accounts. So there is an interchangeability about these strategies. Some companies only use 1 or 2 flavors. Quite often what we find is that with some clients we'll use one-to-many to figure out who's in market, use one-to-few to get more segment specific to warm them up even more, and then one-to-one when you're actually working more closely with sales to get those accounts converted. And here are some of the kind of tactics that you use that sort of differentiate them. So one-to-one is much more sort of meeting centric, and maybe you're using gifting as a way to really show these accounts that you care. You may do things like create a branded website, and I'll show you an example of that in a second. One-to-few is clustered. You may be doing things like virtual meetings on particular topics that are relevant to those segments. And there's all sorts of different things that you can use. We use paid social, like LinkedIn, particularly when we're doing segment-specific marketing. And then one-to-many is much more mass demand generation tactics, like programmatic advertising that's targeted to accounts that are showing intent, for example. So here's an example. It's a company called Nolo that are a real, just an outstanding ABM practitioner. And what they've done, what this is showing is for one of the accounts that they were pursuing, Huntington Bank, they developed a one-to-one landing page, a website specifically for that account. So as they were going through the sales process with them, the customers had a landing page which was tailored to them. And that included things like curated content, which had been specifically picked out by the sales and marketing team to address the needs and the issues that they were hearing from that particular account. This is an example of one-to-few. So I mentioned that one way of doing segment-specific marketing is to focus on your competitors' accounts. And so one of their competitors is a company called Accruent. So what they're doing here is targeting Accruent customers. So when Accruent customers were on LinkedIn, they would see ad banners that were targeted to them to say why you should switch to Nolo. This is an example of a one-to-many dashboard. And so what you're seeing here is, this is for healthcare, is for one of our clients, we targeted several hundred accounts. And we did this through advertising on LinkedIn. We weren't even using intent data. We just advertised based on based on a target account list that they provided. And what we found was that we could identify who seemed to be interested based on the level of engagement. So these accounts here sort of had a fairly, had some engagement, but it was a pretty low engagement with our ads. These were highly engaged and repeatedly engaged. And we could tell that multiple people within the accounts were engaging with our advertising. We also had a lead generation campaign going on. And then as we moved these accounts through the process, there seemed to be a smaller group that were emerging as being clearly in market and then engaged with our client in a sales process. So as you can see, it sort of got this notion of going from one to many, moving them through to a more one-to-one approach. Okay, let's talk about principle number 5. This is using personalization to engage buyers. Now, there are lots of different ways of doing personalization. So, at a high level, there's customization at a segment specific level. So you might do, if you've got, you're in the insurance market, health insurance market, you might tailor your marketing according to geography or size of company or likelihood that a company is engaged with one of your competitors. So you would then create more tailored advertising according to that. That's kind of customization and tailoring. Personalization is when you get down to the level of tailoring the messaging and the content to the specific account, and even in some cases down to the individual. You got to be a bit careful with it, right? Because none of us like the kind of creepy stuff that you get where you're online and you see a banner with your name on it. That stuff doesn't work. That's quite off-putting. So you have to do it very judiciously. Now, one of the questions that we get asked is, does personalization work? And so here's some great data here. So according to McKinsey, more than 3/4 of purchasers are more likely to buy from brands that personalize. And 78% said they're more likely to recommend a brand if they actually have personalized the experience for them. And then the more B2B specific data is that according to Forrester, B2B marketers are doubling down on it. And more than half of B2B marketers are planning to increase their spending on personalized content and technology that helps them do personalization. So here's some examples of personalization. So email. So for example, if you've got a set of accounts, a small set of accounts that seem to be actively in market, you might drop them into a segment specific campaign with a set of an email sequences that are tailored really clearly to the stage of the buyer journey that they're in. And then when you've got an account that's really engaged and you're dealing with individuals, you would then tailor the emails individually. There's also dynamic ad personalization. So there are tools like Follows that allow you to create and brand digital ads that are tailored to specific accounts. So different messaging for different accounts, or maybe putting the accounts, account name in the advertising, like I showed you the example with Nolo. Then there's content personalization. So this is where you personalize, the content according to the stages that the buyer is in. So if they're in an early stage, you might use content which is sort of more upper funnel, like trends and things like that. If they're in a later stage, you might provide things like benchmarking and maybe analyst reports, things like that are much more attuned to where they are in the buying cycle. And then you might personalize it by doing, if you know that they happen to use your competitor's product, you might do a side-by-side of that particular competitor. The last one's kind of a nice technique called personal URLs, which allows you to create a website with a vanity URL, which has the name of the person you're targeting. It's kind of a nice technique to use. All right. 6 is about measuring. So ABM forces you to think about measurement differently. And when you ask ABM practitioners, what's the hardest thing to get right with ABM? What's the hardest thing to master? They all say, or the majority say, that tracking and measuring results is the toughest thing to get right with ABM. So there's an ABM hierarchy that was developed. I think it was developed by Demandbase, which I think is kind of a neat way of thinking about the different way you've got to approach measurement when it comes to ABM. So there's your basic campaign measurement, which is the stuff that we all do, right? Which is click-throughs, web visits, cost per lead, that kind of thing. Then there's marketing performance, and this is ABM specific. So this is related to the account, the accounts that you're targeting, and your target account list, and how well you're doing in terms of converting those particular accounts. And then there's revenue performance. So let me dive a bit deeper on revenue performance. So this is I'm starting with the hardest one to get to. This is the one. These are the measures that actually take the longest to get to, and so those include things like close rates. Our close rate. If you've shifted to ABM, are the close rates improving? Can you attribute a difference in the close rates that were influenced by ABM versus not? Does ABM improve the average deal size? There's a lot of evidence that show that it does. Can you measure that? And then lastly is funnel velocity. Have you got deals moving through faster? So not only have you increased the size of the funnel, but is that funnel moving much faster? Is the throughput better than it had been before? And these are the sorts of measures that you should be actually seeing. That these are the sorts of things that should be improving as you move forward with ABM. I talked about marketing performance. That's the second stage of the funnel. So these are things that are related to the target account list. So what percentage of the target account list is engaged? How are you doing with customer retention and upsell? Can you track a cost per opportunity based on your ABM efforts? And then there are, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the campaign measures because you know those, but as I mentioned, it's really hard to perfect this. And so, what you're going to want to do as you develop an ABM strategy is think about how you're going to evolve it. So maybe in the short term, you look at sort of fairly easy things to see, like conversion rates. And I don't mean sales conversion rates, I mean marketing conversion rates from, engaged to lead. Can you see things like, can you track what percentage of the target accounts are engaging with you? Can you track which accounts you've got penetrated with, some penetration with? And then in the sort of the next phase is then being able to actually try to track the impact that ABM is having on your pipeline, on the cost per opportunity, things like that. And then long term, you want to get to be able to develop a way of tracking the impact that you have on the key sales measures like close rates, deal values, and funnel velocity. Okay, last ABM principle, and that is, anybody you ask is going to tell you ABM won't work without sales and marketing alignment. So when ABM works, both sales and market benefit equally from it. From sales, they find they're wasting less time on bad opportunities because they're working on better qualified opportunities that are in market. They find that deals accelerate faster, and they notice a marketable greater impact from marketing. From a marketing standpoint, the benefit of ABM is it's a much more efficient use of resources as long as you've got the target accounts right. You have a much better working relationship with sales, and you can ask the age-old question about marketing ROI, and you have a much better handle on the measurable impact on revenue. And so what alignment looks like is sales and marketing are joined at the hip on the goals and priorities, on the targets and segments, roles, responsibilities, the reports, the routines, what the measures of success is. And it's a continuous process that's often, but not always, but usually led by marketing. Marketing is usually the one that has to take the initiative on this. Doesn't always happen that way, but I've found that's more the case. Now, where it goes wrong, and I've lived this, is when sales and marketing are not aligned. So I've had, for example, situations where, we were a new sales member was introduced into an ABM program at its early stage, and they had other priorities and didn't believe in the value of it, and so it just killed the program. It stopped working. There again, I've plenty more examples of where sales and marketing were joined at the hip from the get-go, and it's worked really well as a result. Just one little tip, and we'll talk a lot more about this in the more in-depth courses. But one of the key things is to have your SDRs or BDRs, whatever you call them, MDRs, the essentially the prospectors, at the table with marketing. I mean, they're really important that they are, that marketing and the MDRs are working very, very closely together. So in the final part of this course, the final class, we're going to dive into how to put ABM into action. And what we're going to cover is this total customer growth model I've mentioned, typical challenges that you'll face when implementing ABM. I'm going to go through the notion of think, crawl, walk, run, and then to cover off how to design a pilot and what you can do next. So a lot covered in the final class, but this is where you're going to really start to be able to move forward and put it into action. And don't forget, that book is still free to you. All you need to do is pay shipping. So it's $15 on Amazon, and $4 basically if you pay the shipping, and I think you'll enjoy it. So look forward to seeing you on the final class of this ABM 101 course shortly.